Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Charles Schwab Challenge. Going to break down what to expect from Colonial Country Club, which has undergone a renovation. A lot is going to look different here in 2024, as well as some of my top DFS plays and outright bets of the week that I'll be getting to for some of my exposure this week. So by the end, hopefully, you have an idea of what to expect and where I'm going after it in my perspective and how we're going after things. So we'll start off with the golf course, a look at my modeling and the kind of key stats that I'm using to identify some of those top plays. As I mentioned off the bat, this place is going to look a lot different this year. They've dug up the whole property, the agronomy's a little bit different, but a lot of the similar type of tee shots that we had at this golf course, same type of character, right? A lot of mid to short irons that you're going to have in players' hand, but from the slopes on the greens, maybe course history, that's where it's going to get a little bit more iffy. So when players are out there on the greens, there are going to be a lot of differences out there where I think looking at past champions, right, guys that have top 5, top 10 here, maybe isn't the worst idea that you could look at, but definitely there's a little bit of variance here in 2024. So that's right off the bat. If you haven't already seen that, we're going to be dealing with a slightly different golf course, but a lot of those mid to short irons. So when you're looking at my modeling, a lot of my approach play is skewed from 175 yards and in. I think it's going to be a lot about the around the green this year. So something that you get with a golf course that was renovated, we have brand new green complexes here at Colonial Country Club, is that they're going to be super bouncy, super firm the first time around. We saw that a few weeks ago at Quail Hollow for the Wells Fargo Championship, and even with quite a bit of rain that came through, in which they're expecting some rain out there on Wednesday evening and into the night, still had a really firm golf course. So I'm not sure if it's going to be as firm as what we had at Quail Hollow, but certainly something to keep an eye on, and why I think around the green is going to matter. There's firm greens, there's small greens to begin with too. You're going to have a lot of those around the green shots. In terms of your putting, you have pure bent grass greens, a little bit of a weird type of bent grass that I've never seen before this week, so you can take a look at those stats if you want to, as well as putting stats heading in. Off the tee is skewed towards your driving accuracy. Ball speed, driving distance is incorporated just a little bit for me this week, but much more about that driving accuracy. An added component to look at is that with those firm conditions, that hitting the ball close to these pin locations, it is going to be paramount to be playing from the fairway. Spin control is key when you have those cement-like greens, and at the Quail Hollow Club, you saw that effect with some of your top 5, top 10s. Apex height when you have firm conditions is something that I always look at, so probably more important towards Saturday, Sunday when this place really starts to bake out. I got bogey avoidance on there at a difficult track, and in terms of comp courses, I've got the RBC Heritage in the tracks. I got Wildlife Country Club, another short positional golf course, and then Pebble Beach Golf Links, which has its differences, particularly from the agronomy perspective, but still something that I would consider out there for your modeling. And now for some of our top end plays. So just going to go through the board, give you quickly some of my outright plays, some of my core plays for this week, and we'll start it off with Max Homa at $10,400. Now on here, because it's coming out a little bit later, we do have ownership that we can look at, and we have the tee time waves and a little bit of a weather edge at hand too. So something that I've noticed, it is pending change, right? Obviously early on a Tuesday, there's a lot of room for these forecasts to move around, but as of right now, right here on a Tuesday night over here in the Eastern time zone, it looks like the AM PM wave is getting a little bit of an advantage. I say that because on Thursday, it looks like the PM is going to be a little bit spicier. And then really importantly, on Friday, it looks like the morning is actually more windy than the afternoon. So it's a little bit of a double whammy where I think the guys that are going off on Thursday are going to get the better conditions both that day, right out there for round one, and potentially out there in the afternoon on Friday as well. So if that ends up holding, that would be a huge advantage to try and lock in. As of right now, I think it's a nice little advantage, nice little bonus to have on some of your plays, but we'll have to track that there on the Wednesday live stream. So something to note is that we have all the tee times on there, and anyone that is starting there in the early morning on Thursday are the players that I think might get that advantage. But let's talk about the Max Homa play, and really it comes down to skill set. We want guys that are pretty well rounded, and if you take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, Max Homa has been just that, right? Every category but off the tee has been a huge positive. He's been gaining a bunch on approach, around the green, also with the flat stick, and though off the tee it hasn't been his best season, but he's still hitting a decent amount of fairways. He's top 50 on the PGA Tour when it comes to his driving accuracy, and really this is a positional over a power kind of golf course. everything that he's been doing well this year is what is going to be emphasized. So when you take a look at some of the comp courses that we had there, he's also had some decent success at a few of those other tournaments. And at just 17.4% ownership, he's also a little bit of a discount compared to guys like a Colin Morikawa and especially a Scottie Scheffler. Just to give you some early numbers, I've got Colin at just over 20%, I believe at that 22% number, and then I have Scottie Scheffler at nearly 40% projected ownership. So I think Scottie is probably worthy of that ownership, so somebody that I will likely consider playing this week. But somebody like Max Homa at 17.4% is a little bit lower owned, right, because of those options up top. So I think if they were out of the field, he would be by far one of your chalkier players, and potentially even 30% owned if you didn't have a Morikawa or Scheffler to choose from. So I think you're getting a little bit of value when it comes to your ownership projection, and at 22-1, I think in this kind of field has legit winning upside. If he's on the right side of the draw, right, he's coming in with decent form, right, contended in the major out there at the Masters. I mean, even decent out there at the PGA Championship, right? If we take a look at the recent form for him, I know it ended up in a T35. He was a little bit better than that before a little bit of a Sunday collapse, but top 10 at the Wells Fargo, RBC Heritage, right, maybe not his best performance, but seemingly every other week, right, T3, a little bit of a bad week, right, T8, a little bit of a bad week. Maybe this is where we get that top 10 or potentially even a win for Max Homa. So I think the form in general kind of speaks for itself, right? Very well-balanced game. And if anything, right, the one deficiency that we've seen, it should be a little bit less important at this kind of Colonial Country Club. Next up, we've got Siwoo Kim, who I'm taking at 40-1 this week. Also relatively low owned at just 13.4%. I think partially because of the price tag, maybe a little bit more expensive than most people are willing to get to. But another AM Wave tee time that might get an advantage right out here this week. We'll have to see if that ends up holding up. But at 40-1, I took him for an outright bet because he's got legit winning upside at these positional kind of golf courses. And though this isn't a Pete Dye design, right, courses that he is just notorious for going out there and tearing up, it is kind of like a Pete Dye design, right? Pete Dye is about setting up angles off the tee. It is more positional than it is a power game off the tee in most circumstances. And most importantly, you have to hit from the fairway on Pete Dye golf courses, right? To hit the proper portion of those greens, of those green complexes, you've got to be able to apply spin to the golf ball. Siwoo Kim, a very good around the green player too, right? So my number 2 key stat is that around the green play. He checks the short iron approaches better than most people in this field. And though the putting, right, can be a little bit iffy, right? He's not a power player off the tee, right? We're not worried about that driving distance as much this week. And you can see putting is maybe a little bit de-emphasized, right? I'll just tell you, I have it about 20% in my model this week, maybe 25% when you include all the different metrics that fall under putting, but much lower than we normally have, right? Putting is normally one of the bigger parts of my modeling week in, week out. And this week, it's just maybe a little bit of an afterthought down there with some of these off the tee numbers that I don't think are all that important either. So then 2 things that I'm really emphasizing, right, that around the green and approach, he is world class in both categories. If you go to the last 24 measured rounds, I'll show you what I'm talking about, right? Gaining close to 3/4 of a stroke when it comes to the approach play. Around the green play, gaining 0.39 shots per round. Just outrageously good stuff from Siwoo Kim. And if you take a look at the course history, worth noting, again, I think this is kind of wacky this week because the green complexes, everything is just a little bit different. In some cases, a lot different, right, out here in 2024. But you can see it's been a little bit of a mixed bag, right? Last year was okay for Siwoo, but with draws and cuts before that. Max Homa, you like the top 10 before that, right? You're okay with the top 25s that he's posted. But these kind of players, right, because they don't have wins, they don't have those elite tier finishes, might get discounted by some people, and I don't know if that's fair, given all the changes that we have here at Colonial. So, if people are going to hold themselves back from playing these sort of guys because they haven't had a winner that top 5 yet, then I'll take a chance on them at what is going to be a completely different golf course. So we'll have to see if it plays easier or harder. I've heard people like Michael Kim, he tweeted out saying that he thinks it's going to play easier this year. I've heard from a few players on site through other people that they think it's going to play a little bit easier too. And I've heard the complete opposite. I've heard that it's very firm, right, because of the new green complexes, and that it might play really difficult here in 2024. So we'll have to see how it actually plays out there on Thursday. I am very eager to see some of those scoring averages, but if it plays harder, like, my intuition tells me that it's going to probably play like the same, if not slightly harder out here in 2024 with the added length that they're going with. If it does play slightly harder out there, like I think is possible, right? Siwoo Kim, that around the green play is a must-have, right? Max Homa, by the way, playing really well around the green rate lately. That feels like something that you want to go out there and target for this kind of golf tournament. Next up, we've got ourselves Sepp Straka, who I'm taking at 45-1. So I've got him at sub 15% ownership at 11.7% in my latest run of ownership. Also an AM Wave tee time, so just a little added bonus if you're trying to lock that in, if that's still the case right out there on Wednesday. Again, we'll cover that on the live stream on Wednesday, so we'll know if that's the case then. But Sepp Straka fits this kind of golf course, right? Off the tee, he's not always the best player, right? He's not super long, right? He's not short off the tee, but he's not an elite tier power player. And he's also not that accurate. So you really want to play him at courses where it's more so about the approach play and around the green. Around the green for him can be a little bit hit or miss. He kind of goes on runs where he's decent around the green, runs where he's really not that good. And you can see lately, it's been a little bit of the negative, right? He's a positive in every category but around the green. But normally, right, Sepp Straka, we need him hitting greens to get into contention, right? His real X factor, if he's going to go out there and get into contention, is if he can hit more than 13, 14 greens of regulation per round. And at a golf course that surrenders about 10 greens per round, if you're hitting about 14, that means you're gaining probably a stroke and a half per round with the approach play. That is completely possible for Sepp. We've seen him at these short positional tracks absolutely tear it up. Though TPC Southwind was not one of these golf courses we talked about, it is a golf course that I'm considering for some of my comps this week. It's Bermuda grass, so not the same agronomy as what you're going to have this week, but from the fairways and approaches, you have Bermuda all over this week, so that's similar, and also just a short par 70. So a lot of the same type of tee shots required, right? A lot of less than driver holes around Memphis over there at TPC Southwind, and also a lot of shots from 175 yards and in. And of course, right, he almost won that event going against Will Zalatoris. So a player that I think has upside at these shorter events, right? One at the Honda Classic. I wouldn't say that the PGA National Championship course is short by any means, but there's a lot of less than driver holes, right? There's a lot of holes where you're hitting 3-wood or even iron off the tee, and that's the kind of golf course that he's won at in the past. That's a real difficult track too. It was extremely windy the year he went out there and won. So if he can win at a PGA National, right, I think he can win at a difficult or slightly firm and fast Colonial Country Club. So at $8,300, only about 12% ownership, I think is decent enough ownership to go out there taking 25-30% of your lineups and go out there and get your leverage to the field there. Before we talk about some value plays, so still some outrights plays to come here, I just want to go ahead and talk about my Patreon page for a second. If you want access to these spreadsheets that you see throughout my content, well, make sure to go ahead and check out my Patreon. There's a link down in the description of the video, and on there is where you can get access to all of these spreadsheets for yourself. So on there, of course, we've got my player poll on there, all my outright bets that I'm taking, all of the research that we use in these videos could be yours for every single player in the field. So of course, right, I like talking about my main 6 plays here, but my player poll is usually closer to 30, maybe even 40 players for any given week, as well as all the different pieces of exposure that I'm taking for other contests. So you can check out my GPP player poll. Of course, there's the Discord to go out there and ask any questions. We got my model rankings, my model weightings that you can get on the Patreon version, shots gained metrics, event history, recent form, you name it, right? All there to expedite your process, give you all the research in one place, so you're not fishing around trying to do it a million different times. So check that out if you guys haven't already. It's down there in the link into this video, and gives you access to all the different DFS content I'm posting. That includes all the main slate stuff that you see in these videos week in, week out, but also the showdown content that I feature in my live streams for rounds 2 through 4. So make sure to check it out if you haven't already, and that is again in the description of this video. And now for our value play. So we're going to start with Aaron Rai, who I took at 65-1 this week. So definitely a long shot, not somebody I'm counting on winning in this event, but an AM Wave tee time in models as my number 2 ranked play this week. And it's all about the ball striking, right? If you go down to Aaron Rai, I mean, very accurate off the tees. He's normally a top 30 player on tour when it comes to driving accuracy. He's one of the best green regulation players on tour, right? In terms of his approach play, is routinely gaining over half a stroke per round. You can see lately closer to 0.75 strokes per round. And the short game, though historically it's been a little bit hit or miss, there are a lot of spells where he'd be losing in both of these 2 categories. it's been okay lately. And honestly, for Aaron Rai, an okay short game and his elite tier ball striking is going to make him a shit ton of money out there in the PGA Tour. He's very consistent. He makes a lot of cuts. He's Mr. Cash Games if you're out there and playing outside of GPPs. But at $7,800, I think he has upside at these difficult kind of tracks. If you've seen where he's won internationally, it's almost always been at difficult golf courses with winning scores of single digits under par. And though I think something closer to 12, maybe 15 under is what we're going to see win this golf tournament, that's still within reason for Aaron Rai, right? You just don't want him to have to go out there and win a birdie fest because he's not going to do that. Aaron Rai is not that sort of player. What he is he'll play boring golf. He'll go out there just bored to death with fairways and greens, and that's what you're going to have to do to go out here and win at Colonial Country Club. So I wouldn't bet him to win a major, wouldn't bet him to win a signature event really ever, unless he steps up his game astronomically here over the next few years. Possible. We'll have to see if he gets to that kind of stage. But at a Charles Schwab challenge, even against Scotty Scheffler in the field, I think he has upside to win in one of these like medium tier kind of events on the PGA Tour. So if it's going to be really windy, which for days 1 and 2 it does look like it'll be at least a little bit windy over the first few rounds, I think that plays heavily into his favor. A firm and fast golf course with windy conditions out there is the kind of golf course that I want Aaron Rai on. So if this weather edge really does give him an advantage over day 1 and day 2, there's just another reason to go out there and hammer him for this golf course. So only about 10% ownership down here in the 7K range. That's not low by any means, but it's also not like 15-20% like you get for some of the super chalk down here. So again, I think a reasonable ownership number that I'm going to get over the field on, and somebody that doesn't really, he at least hasn't shown a lot of upside on the PGA Tour, but he potentially has that at a difficult golf course like this. Next up, we've got Austin Eckert, who I took at 55-1 to win this week. Obviously won this year at a hard golf course in PGA National. I'm down there at the Honda Classic, I guess Cognizant Classic now here in 2024. But $7,500, give me him at this kind of golf course too, right? It's about accuracy off the tee. It's not a power golf course. That's a check for Eckert. He's not a bomber by any means off the tee. Not short either, but not a bomber, kind of like Sepp. And what you like about Eckert is that from 175 yards and in, this guy's a flusher, right? He's maybe not the best player from 200 and out, but if you give him a mid to short iron, this guy's top 50 in almost every single proximity bucket. On top of that too, the short game has at least been serviceable over the last 24 rounds. So if you take a look at it, right, the ball striking numbers are always going to pop for Eckert. Around the green is the one real deficiency, but kind of like Sepp Straka, right? If you're going to win at PGA National, Grandy Bermuda course, kind of like you get here over here in the Dallas area, you've got to have a short game that can at least get it done for 1 week at a time. And we saw him do it at PGA National. Again, it's not one of my top 3 comps that I'm looking at this week, but kind of like TPC Southwind is another course that I would be looking at for comps. If he can get it done there, he can get it done at this kind of golf course too. So 11.5% ownership is certainly not low in this kind of range, but still the kind of number that I'll take in 25, maybe even 30% of my lineups and get that leverage to the field on. So he's in the proper wave. I think he has legit winning upside, so that's why I took him at 55-1. And more importantly, in DFS, he doesn't have to win to be optimal, right? Top 10 would certainly get it done at $7,500, let alone the top 5 upside that I think he brings to the table as well. Decent bent grass putter too, a little bit of an added bonus out there with Austin Eckert. And now for our last play, who I bet at 225-1. And the last time we bet Andrew Novak, I believe he was at least, I think he was like shot off the lead after 54 holes. We're going to take him at $6,300. I didn't bet him outright last time, but we're going to do it here at just 4.1% projected ownership. Another AM guy, if you can't tell, right, that's a theme that I'm going with some of these plays. But a guy at $6,300 that I think has a lot of upside at this kind of golf course. He's not the worst off the tee player, but he's also not the best off the tee player, that's for sure. Is much more known for his stellar approach play, really good from 175 yards and in. And also in terms of his around the green play, is decent there too, right? Gaining about a quarter of a stroke per round. Now off the tee, right, not going to gain half a stroke per round because he's not that elite tier off the tee distance player, but does hit quite a few fairways. The one category that he can lack in would be the flat stick, and it always has been the flat stick for Andrew Novak. Well, bentgrass, maybe not his favorite surface, but what we've seen from Andrew Novak is that he can get a little bit streaky, right? As soon as he shows even a glimmer of hope with the flat stick is the time to jump on with Andrew Novak. And what you've seen over his last few starts has been a little bit of erratic play, right? If you go to the recent form, go down here to Novak, you'll see that he's gone T30. Let's see, hasn't played much over these last 4 or 5 weeks. What you gotta hope is that he can get something moving with the flat stick, because if he does, the tee to green place, kind of stands up no matter where you're gonna play, or he gains in all 3 categories. If he can even just be a neutral with the flat stick, that is almost certainly a made cut, maybe even a top 30 finish. If he gains 1-2 strokes putting, that's potentially even a top 10 finish right there. So in the past, right, he had been that top 10 machine who had like a top 8 finish in I think 3 straight events for us. If you were betting him top 10, you were getting him at like 10, sometimes even 15 to 20 to 1 odds. And out here in GPPs, if he's going to be 4.1% owned, I'll take that upside, right? Because if he spikes that top 8 finish, that is for sure an optimal play in the Largeville GPPs. And at $6,300, that would also save you a ton of salary to go up and spend up for an extra spot in your lineup. So I love the upside here. I like the course fit, right? Take him at difficult golf courses. That's where we've kind of seen him pop off. And really where he had all his best performances was during the Florida swing, or even just a little bit before that, right? Down there in the Florida swing, you have Bermuda grass from tip to toe. And though the greens here are bent grass, they're not Bermuda. All the other surfaces are that Bermuda, right? So your chipping, your tee shots, your approach shots are going to be very familiar for somebody like Andrew Novak, who I think that gives them a little bit of an advantage. So though I'm going after all these AM guys, right, know that is subject to change, because these weather forecasts, right, these weathermen love to change their mind last second. But if this holds up, right, I feel really good about this portfolio of exposure. So it was kind of nice to be able to come out with this video a little bit later, right? So we'd have the ownership to look at. We'd also have the tee times and all of that to go ahead and incorporate. So hopefully found that a little bit helpful out there this time. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview this week. Before you hopping out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also go ahead and comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament. If you can go ahead and get that winner, and it's anyone but Scotty Scheffler, you'll go ahead and win a free month of my Patreon. So the only one you can't take will be Scotty. Anyone else is live on the board. The only other caveat, once a player is taken once, they can't be taken again. So go ahead, get your comment in down below. Go ahead and enter for a free month of my Patreon page. On there, of course, right, is where you can find all the spreadsheets that you see in my content. So whether you want to look at it for my player pool, projections, ownership, or just for all the research that it has to offer, make sure to check that out in the description and enter for your free chance to earn that month. So I appreciate you guys. Smash that like button if you haven't already. I'll see you guys for that live stream, which will be Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So if there's any specific questions that you want to ask me about a player, any deep dives you want to do, weather questions, we'll look at that weather edge that I've talked about, ownership, GPP strategy, all of that. Make sure to tune into the live stream. So looking forward to it, guys. Best of luck out there with your exposure, and I'll see you guys for the rest of the content throughout the week.